On today's Transport Evolved, Ecotality's bankruptcy, GM's promise to catch Tesla with a 200-mile EV, and Tesla's self-driving car of the future. Plus news from BMW, Nissan, California, and more. Coming up next on Transport Evolved. Transport Evolved is sponsored by audiblepodcast.com. To claim your free audiobook from a selection of over 85,000 growing titles for your iPod or MP3 player, head to www.audiblepodcast.com/Transport Evolved. And by your kind donations. To make a gift to the show or to set up a monthly subscription, head to www.transportevolved.com. We thank you for your kind support. And proud to support Chronovirus, the latest book by Long Island author Aaron Crocco. To find out more and get a free chapter, head to www.aaroncrocco.com. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 166 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Thursday, September 19th, 2013. My name is NIkki Gordon-Bloomfield.
And I'm Mark Chatterley. How are you, Nikki? I'm back.
I know. Welcome back, Mark. How are you?
I was only a week away, but it feels like I've been away for so long.
I know. Your hair is growing so quickly.
It's like a superpower. It's pretty much the worst superpower I can imagine having, but it's my superpower. I'm doing an experiment at the moment to see if head hair grows at the same rate as beard hair, and at what point it stops, if it does stop.
That is such an awesome science project. My son has a science project that he has to do for school where he has to do independent learning and he can make up any experiment. I might have to get him to experiment on you, if that's the right word.
Why not?
So we've had a really, really busy week, haven't we, Mark? The new Transport Evolved site is coming along nicely. The new setup for the Transport Evolved. Should we show them? Is it ready to show them a sneaky peek?
The website, it's still looks a bit basic, but I mean you can get an impression for what's going to be there, I guess.
Let's show them a sneaky peeky. This is what it's going to look like. Look at that! The new website with all the new stuff. Isn't that brilliant?
With probably some extra bits and bobs thrown in as well, just to make it even better.
Extra bits thrown in for extra measure. But that's what the new site is going to look like. And if you haven't watched the show, you've not seen that. But next week, to coincide with International Plug-in Day, we're going to switch the site. We're going to have a couple of new shows launching. You've already been seeing the Quick Charge and the Charged Up online. And this show is going to go to a Sunday night. And I'm saying it at the beginning of the show. I'm going to say it at the end of the show too. And this week, Mark, we've had the Renault Zoe. We've done a Quick Charge and a Charged Up, haven't we?
We have, yes. That's all. Some of it's going through editing. Some of it is just waiting to go live.
Yep. And we also released the BYD E6 this week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can see the whole of Nikki's Quick Charged on that, and my Quick Charge should be going live tomorrow, I believe, or did it go live today? I
think it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
It's going live tomorrow. It should have gone live today, but I've had one of those days. I'm sorry, Mark.
That's okay. It's all good. And you can see me being incredibly British while having a rep sat next to me judging the car.
We should go and introduce our guest for the show. He's been off the show for a very long time, and there's a good reason for that. It's because for a while, he was our boss, sort of. Or the patron for the charity that we worked for. He wasn't actually our boss, but he was the guy who started it. He is no longer connected to us in any way, shape or form. So he can come back on the show. Welcome back, Mr. Kevin Sharpe. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be allowed back.
Yes, for journalistic integrity, you see. We can't have too many connections. You are actually, this is a southwest show for the Bristol, Bath, Stroud crew today. You could actually draw a little triangle between the three of us. And
absolutely.
Within EV range of each other. Within the Zoe range, Leaf range, and even Twizy range, if you're feeling absolutely brave. If you want to take part in the show today, you can do so by going on the website and looking at the show notes, which are at tinyurl.com/Transport Evolved 166. You can tweet us using the hashtag Transport Evolved or at Transport Evolve on Twitter. And you can also watch us live. www.transportevolve.com/live. So, Kevin, you've been busy on holiday, haven't you?
Yeah, well, officially I was on holiday, although, whenever you work for yourself, it's actually very difficult to get time off. Yeah, we were away in Italy, based in Italy for just over 5 weeks, I'm very happy to say. And I think one of the highlights, I did actually get to do some EV stuff and managed to drive a Model S, which was just extraordinary. So, and I really enjoyed your video, the Model S recently
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
It was fantastic.
So, did you get to drive the Model S before us or after us?
I think it's actually about the same week. I think it might be,
okay.
it was within a couple of days of one another, bizarrely, as these things turn out.
Now, you are a Roadster owner, Kevin. Are you tempted?
Am I? Oh, wow. I love the Model S. I absolutely love it. It's fantastic. The drive is extraordinary. The technology is amazing. For me personally, it's big, and there's only two of us and a small dog. So we travel everywhere in the Roadster. I love the Roadster. It's an extraordinary car. So no, well, even though every time I get in the Model S or get near it, I'm very tempted. I don't believe we'll get one. We are very, really looking forward to the Gen 3 car. And the moment the order book's open on that, then we'll have an order for that.
Yeah, I must admit, I've been talking to so many people this week about Teslas, and the number of people who say, "Yeah, Model E, we're going to put our name down." It really is like that. Let's move on.
It's one of those cars. I was just going to say, it's one of those cars that, I mean, if I've got the money for a deposit, I'll be putting down a deposit before they've even announced what it's going to look like. Just because it's even if it doesn't then turn out to be very good, you've only lost a little bit of money, and usually they're refundable, these deposits anyway. But I was just going to say, it's easy for you people who've driven the Model S.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, if you're listening, Tesla, Mark didn't get a drive, and I feel really guilty bad. But Mark did let me. He said, "Go first." I mean,
yeah, I did.
I don't think he meant it though, Nikki.
Yeah, you see, if you're too polite, Mark, that's your problem. You're too polite, mate. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on with the week's stories. We've got Kevin on for a reason today, because a lot of today's stories talk about charging networks. And as some of you may know, Kevin founded a charity called Zero Carbon World, which is one of its remits is to help businesses have charging infrastructure. But it's not obviously the whole of Zero Carbon World, but it is a very important part of the charity. But in the States this week, Ecotality, which is a big company over there, it received nearly $100 million in government funding from the US Department of Energy 4 years ago, has just filed for bankruptcy. Now, Ecotality has been teetering on the brink of bankruptcy now for about 2-3 months, maybe even longer, but it is now in bankruptcy. There is questions about what happens to the Blink network of charging stations, some of which are no longer working. I spoke to a couple of owners who have domestic charging stations that have stopped working, and they can't get anybody to answer the phone to fix them. So this is bad news for the electric car industry, period. Interestingly, though, Nissan came along and said to Ecotality, okay, you're in bankruptcy, but we will lend you $1.25 million, which I assume is to tide them over until they can sell off some of their assets, liquidate some of their assets, and maybe be a leaner, greener, more efficient charging provider. Now, Kevin, there's been so much this week in the news talking about this bankruptcy, talking about how charging networks don't have business models, talking how charging networks are all screwed. And of course, on the back end of that, electric cars are no good. All of this money's been wasted. What's your take on what's been going on at Ecotality? Where did it go wrong? And what does this mean?
Well, I think the fundamental problem with Ecotality is the basic assumption that there is a sustainable business model in terms of a standalone network. I've looked extensively and spent a great deal of time looking at network models, and I've yet to find one that would pass an even basic understanding of business. They fundamentally, the number of drivers is simply too small. The technology is too expensive, both to install and to operate. And drivers have got very used to extremely low cost energy, and will not pay anything like the sort of rates that would be needed to sustain a business, a standalone business, a charging network. And it's across the board. It isn't just Ecotality. I mean, if you look in, there was an attempt to get a public listing from one of our UK networks recently, and that was withdrawn. And I have no doubt that it's because there just is not the business appetite to actually run these networks.
And I think there's another challenge in when it comes to the funding here, because you're seeing people coming along going, oh, we're going to put all these electric car charging points. It's going to be brilliant. And the governments all around the world, it's not just one government. It's not just the US government, just not the British government. Go, okay, here you go. Have some money, fix the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's it's a real problem. The fundamental issue, if you strip it all back, is that the people making the decisions know nothing whatsoever about electric cars. So, you get in the UK, we're currently spending £400 million in this area. And, the people that are involved in these projects are all lovely people. I've met many of them, nice people doing their best, but they don't understand one end of an electric car from another. And inevitably, you end up with ad hoc systems that just do not meet the needs of drivers.
I've got a very interesting, just to jump in, I was looking at Charge Masters network in the UK, because I've got a trip I need to do in a couple of weeks' time to Oxford and back, which is out of my return range. But so I need to charge somewhere. Going on their online map, it shows me where all their points are and whether they're being used, but doesn't tell me what power they are or what sockets are attached to them. So an email to them saying, I need the information. I need to know what cable it is. I need to know how long I'm going to have to be plugged in for. Right. That's vital information for me. And the reply I got from them said, we don't have that information. Their reply was, we do not have that information.
Wow.
And it just goes into Kevin's point that these people don't know what problem it is they're solving. At the moment, they're just putting charges in.
Yeah. It's very interesting. We're talking in the chat room. Doug and Jim were talking about ChargePoint, which is obviously an American company. And they do seem to have a workable business model, because they are building the charging infrastructure by doing something very unique. They make the charging stations. They provide the charging stations to their clients who buy the charging stations outright, and they administer the network, but they don't own the charging stations. The charging stations are owned by the businesses who purchase them. And so therefore there's a duty of care and a duty of ownership that's taken on by the people who've bought the charging stations. And I must admit, if you buy a charging station, you're much more likely to want to keep that charging station, A, in working order, and B, bringing you revenue, because the ChargePoint network, the owner of the charging point gets to charge whatever the heck they want, using credit cards over the phone, using the prepaid cards, and they do seem to be working. But with Blink and networks in the UK, what we're seeing is they are putting a huge amount of money up front, putting these networks in. The networks are not being used because there aren't the cars to use them, which means that if a unit gets vandalized or broken and there's not the IT support to back it up, someone arrives, they find out it's broken, big brouhaha. But when it does work, they are so desperate to capitalize on any and all drivers that they are asking stupid amounts for charging. I mean, there's been a discussion in the UK recently. How much would you, and some people have actually come along and said, how much would you pay for a rapid charge? And I had this very interesting conversation this week with someone going, the only way that it could be done would be to pay per kilowatt hour. But the problem is, in the UK, you can't do that unless you're a utility company. So I don't know if that's the same in the States, but the idea of paying a flat fee for a charge is just terrible. And I think that's going to cause so much problems. And it's not cost effective for drivers, and therefore people won't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the business model you've described is one step closer to one that will eventually be sustainable. I mean, obviously, Zero Carbon World, we do something not dissimilar in that we donate the charging station, but get the locations to pay for the installation. And it is critical that you get the host location to actually spend some money, because anybody that has something for free doesn't value it. And there's no way that a location, for instance, will dedicate a parking space to an electric vehicle unless they care enough. And one of the ways of making them care is to get them to spend some money. Now, one of the issues, of course, is this whole the moment you try and bring rapid charging into that, you're into a very different cost model. And I've yet to see anywhere a rapid charging model that is actually going to be sustainable. The hardware is just simply too expensive. So I think the model whereby they are passing ownership, and again, Zero Carbon will do exactly the same thing. The ownership passes to the site, I think, is great. One of the risks, of course, of doing this and handing control completely over to the location is a risk that they will charge whatever they want, and it could be massive.
Yeah.
But the solution to that is competition. And we've seen it ourselves. We have one location that was charging £15 for a charge. And while they were the only site in that location, they were charging £15. Inevitably, very, very few people used it, a few Tesla owners. But we managed to get another site quite close that was actually doing free charging. And inevitably, the £15 one is now down to £5. So competition solves that. But I think ownership by the site is critical for this in the longer term.
Now, do you think that Nissan is going to try and use Ecotality's misfortunes to build itself a Tesla-style quick charge network? Because Ecotality, the Blink network, has these CHAdeMO rapid charge stations. Actually, I wrote an article this week about it, where Nissan could actually come along and go, okay, we've invested in you. We've given you 1.25 million. We're going to give you more money to keep you afloat. But now what we want you to do is give our drivers free charging like Tesla. Do you think that's a possibility? Is it a smart move?
Well, I think we could speculate about this. The difficulty thing, of course, will be, I don't know the terms of the loan that they were given and whether or not they'd actually have to go through bankruptcy before anybody could effectively, purchase them as a network. And obviously there are things going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. The fact that they've made a loan to this company. I mean, I don't know the terms of the various, monies involved. So that would be a critical question. Would it be a way? Well, yeah. I mean, obviously buying a network that somebody has already started would be a great way of bolstering your network.
And they already own.
Just finish. The real issue for Nissan, of course, is this where they, do they really understand that charging networks sell cars?
Yeah.
And I think that's the critical question for them. If they understand that, then they will commit to it 100%, and there will be a rapid charging network. If they don't understand that, then it will just be a piecemeal deployment and not much different than what we've seen in the UK or elsewhere.
I was
going to say, it's like the second half of the puzzle for Nissan, because when they realised the first CHAdeMO units they were putting in were incredibly unreliable, they bought the company that made them and refined the processes, and that's why we now have the slimline models, which, while not hugely reliable, are far more reliable than they were before. So it's now, it seems as though this could be the second piece of the puzzle, but the issue is their network has to be so much larger than Tesla's network does because of
range.
The range. Yeah. And so they need redundancy at every location, and they need them in more places. So it's a much bigger job, although Nissan, to be fair, are a much bigger company and can throw more resources at it.
And the other thing to bear in mind is that Nissan doesn't need to do what Tesla's done because it's a different car model. I don't care what people say. to be honest, because a Nissan needs to recharge every, let's talk about it practically, 60 to 70 miles when you're on the freeway, I don't think I would want to do more than about 300 miles in a Leaf, which means that, areas that are already served well by the Ecotality stroke Blink network, I'm thinking the I-5 corridor, Seattle, Washington, that kind of area, but also all the way down the West Coast, all the way down the East Coast eventually, those kind of urban areas where the Leaf's going to be in its native environment, that's fine. I don't think anybody is going to expect Nissan or any other automaker to make the same kind of cross-country trips possible in an EV like the Leaf. For that, you'd need a different vehicle. Let's move on. In Surrey, British Columbia, in Canada, new gas stations must now have quick charging or alternative vehicle fuels on site, says the City Council. This is brilliant. This is a new city ordinance just for the city of Surrey, BC. If there's a new gas station, it's going to have charging. This is brilliant news. I don't think we need to cover this other than just to say, well done, kudos to you. I know someone in Surrey, so I'm going to try and see if I can get them to do us a little quick report talking about this, maybe get an interview with someone on the ground. Brilliant news. Clipper Creek introduced last week a smaller, cheaper 240-volt EVSE for the US market. It means if you are in the US and you have a J1772 car, which you probably do, you can now do what we've been doing in Europe for the past 2 years. Have a cord in your trunk that comes along and plugs into a 240-volt outlet and charges your car up. No EVSE required. Obviously, there's some caveats. Make sure that you are plugging into an appropriate NEMA plug and that the socket that you're plugged into is rated for the current that you are trying to draw from it. But to be honest, I think it's 12 amps, isn't it? 240 volts. I think that's what those are. This is great. This is great news. I wonder if they'd work over here. I wonder if those units would work over here. And finally, in this section, UK charging stations, Kevin, coming under fire again in the UK. And this time it really has become a political hot potato, hasn't it? This is the north of England. This is Preston City Council. And it's got there are two charging points in Preston already. Okay. This is in Lancashire for those who don't know. And there is an application for 2 more to go in. The City Council are objecting, despite the fact that the funding is coming from the County Council. I'm not very good at explaining British politics, but it's a bit like saying the money's come from the state, but then the city is complaining about it. So our counties are similar in some ways to American counties. They're kind of somewhere between American counties and American states. But you have this idea of the money's come from the slightly larger local government, and then the city is bitching and moaning about it and saying, we don't want them. They're costing all this money, blah, 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 blah. Kevin, saber rattling, just creating a nonsense or what?
Oh, well, my guess is, I don't know the detail of this story, but there is certainly some obligation on the local council who would receive it to maintain it. And certainly that's one of the issues that we've been looking at with some local deployments. And unfortunately, some of these back office systems are very expensive to run. So it may be, and I'm speculating here, it may be that that's what's behind this decision is simply, that they're worried about concerned about the longer term cost obligations that they're taking on. Or it could just as simply be that, that particular council, the politicians involved think electric cars are crazy and there's plenty of that around. So,
as we've said in the past on the show, we've heard some stories from various parts of the UK that suggest that there are some journalists going around just using Freedom of Information Acts to obtain usage figures for charging stations to turn around and go, well, no one's using them. Which is, a shame, to put it bluntly, shameful perhaps. And as a journalist, I say, for shame, you shouldn't be doing that. I think in this case, it was a Conservative politician going, oh, they're putting in all these charging stations and no one's using them. It is frustrating. Perhaps someone needs to produce a fact sheet talking them through the longer process. The tail is quite long on EV charging stations. It's not an instant gratification thing.
No, and what you have to ask, what problem is it solving? I mean, there is, of course, the problem that people want to charge up, but there is also the problem that people are hesitant to buy these cars if they don't see an infrastructure around them. And that infrastructure is, as we know, most people charge at home. So the infrastructure doesn't have to be all that big to make it useful to a driver, but you don't know that until you're driving the car. So there's actually a problem that the infrastructure needs to appear to be a lot more prevalent and appear to be bigger than it actually is. So if the aim and the problem is getting people into these cars, then there is an argument for sticking them just about everywhere, but even where they might not be that useful. And I know I'm a big advocate of thinking about where these charging stations go. So I just think that people need to think about which problem are they solving? Are they solving the people need to charge up problem, or are they solving the we want people to buy the cars problem? Because they've both got a slightly different way and a slightly different end game for where you install charging stations and how you install them.
I think you're totally right on that, Mark. You are totally right on that. Let's go and have an audiobook, Mark. We missed you last week.
We did. Audible. We like Audible. I like Audible. Audible is an online service. It's run by Amazon or owned by them. I'm not quite sure of the relationship between them, but it is a distribution site where you can go on and you pay a certain amount of your monies every month, and they give you credits every month. And then you spend those credits on audiobooks. Most of the books on there are 1 credit. You might occasionally find one that's 2 credits, but I've never come across one in all the time I've been doing it, which is about a year and a half now. They have a bajillion and 7 books. That is a number. Don't laugh. And it covers every type of book you can think of. There are biographies, autobiographies, fiction, non-fiction. There's a sci-fi section, which I hang around in quite a lot. And now, thanks to a system they have in the US called ACX, it allows self-publishers and very small publishing companies who are based in the US to put their audiobooks on too. So it's not just big names and big stars.
That's cool. They need to bring that to the UK, don't they, Mark?
I have various issues with it, but it's cool in some senses. So we'll leave it at that.
For those who don't know, Mark is actually runs his own audiobook company. So I'd love to see him on. But what's the pick this week, Mark?
The pick, you've chosen a book that I've not heard of before, so it's quite interesting. Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, a novel.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting story. So it follows this web programmer who loses his job in the big couple of years ago when the crash happened, loses his job in San Francisco and ends up working in this bookstore, helping them, doing a bit of web stuff. And he notices that this bookstore is quite eclectic and there's lots of people coming at all hours of the day and night. And they never seem to actually buy or read any books. So he sort of follows through this. Why are all these people coming here? It's a bit of a mystery book, a bit of an adventure book, and it just sounds awesome. So let's have a little listen. And that is Audible. Great book. I suggest you give it a go. So thanks to Audible for their support of the show. And by supporting Audible, you do support us as well. Believe me, we need more Audibles. Okay, time to move on to a sad but also reminiscent part of the show. I think it's probably the best way. A memorial to a gentleman that you probably never heard of. I have. I've spoken to him many times. He helped me in many ways, but he was responsible for regulation in California at the Air Resources Board. Mr. Craig Childers. He passed away in August. And for those of you who follow me on Twitter will know that his death came as a real sudden shock to everybody in the EV world. He was in his 50s, had, I believe it was a heart attack, and passed away. The reason why I know Craig is because he used to own a collection of these funny little cars. They are called City Ls, and I used to have a City L. And they are German in manufacture. Well, they were originally Danish in design, but then they were made in Germany after the original company went bust. And a few were imported into the US. Craig happened to be one of the few enthusiasts maintaining them and keeping them on the road. It's a handful of about 20 or so cars that made it to the US. I used to have one, and in Europe the only way you could work on them was to be able to read German or Danish, because you didn't have an English language manual. Craig had the only English language manual, I think, in the world, and he very kindly sent it to me to help me work on my City L in the UK. And I've since, with permission, reproduced it and sent it to various enthusiasts, as a free kind of help to them. Last time I spoke to Craig was about 2 years ago, and then suddenly discovered that he died. He was a very, very, very big champion of EVs. He was an engineer, and I'm not doing him justice, but there's an excellent obituary on Plug-in Cars, so I suggest you go and read it. And he never owned, in his life, a single production electric vehicle. He owned small-scale production vehicles like the City L. He owned conversions. He owned experimental vehicles. And he used to commute in his City L. So our sympathies go to his family and to those who worked alongside him. Moving on, BMW i3 production is now underway, and the i3 and the i3 Rex, the range extended version, qualify for $7,500 US federal tax credits. This is good news, Mark.
It's very good news. I mean, we like it when the cars get the tax credits, but the car itself is. I feel bad because the last time I was on this show talking about it, I was just saying how ugly and awful it is, but it's really lovely in person. I don't understand how that can work, but something about reducing this car to 2 dimensions doesn't make it look good.
Well, here's a trick. In the automotive world, fish eyes do strange things, just like they do in houses. I mean, you've ever looked at a house to buy a house and you think that it doesn't look anything like the photographs? Same with cars, big fisheye lenses, 10mm lenses, 12mm lenses make things look weird. They put things out of proportion. And I suspect that that's what happened with BMW i3. It's a great looking car. Inside, it's still a little bit different. You
have to be quite a minimalist, I think, to enjoy the interior.
Yeah, you have to like the minimalist feel. It feels in some ways a little bit like a Swedish Aarhus, maybe. But I think it will catch on. It wouldn't be a very good car for me, but I think it's going to be good for some people. Kevin, have you seen it in the flesh?
No, not in the flesh. We're supposed to have a test drive coming up, which will be really interesting because my partner Susie will be driving it, and we're thinking seriously of it as a stopgap until the Tesla Gen 3 is available.
Okay.
With the Rex, I mean the range of the pure battery version is not enough for what we need. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and if it comes in early enough, and the Gen 3 Tesla is far enough away, and we can lease it, we'll probably lease one. And
there was an interesting consternation from BMW active E drivers at the moment, because they're saying, BMW said that the i3's range is more than enough because we only ever drive 30 miles a day in our active E's.
Yeah, I had this discussion with the man and got quite upset at him and had to end the conversation when we saw it in person.
So it's BMW is a little bit cocksure on that one, and I don't think it's helping, and it's not helping the BMW Active E drivers who are going, no, we do want longer range cars, damn it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's the idea that you're given a car that has that limited range, and then they've used that to turn around and go, well, you only drive within the range of the car you've got. Well, of course you do. That's logical. It was just when I spoke to the BMW spokesperson and was talking about, well, did you not consider you've got this space where the Rex goes? Why didn't you offer an optional upgrade to add more batteries into there? And for people who wanted to go a little bit further, but on battery power. And the reply was, we didn't guess that this is the range people need. It's not I think, it's not I imagine, it's not I guess. It's we know. We have got the studies that prove that people will drive within the range of this car. And no amount of me going that there's a difference between what people actually need and what they perceive that they need, and bringing up the fact that all of their research was done on cars which have a limited range anyway, so people tend to drive within the range of those cars, just fell on deaf ears. They are very, very, very sure that no one will ever want a car that can go more than
it's ridiculous.
Current range.
It's ridiculous because for example, our Leaf, for those of you who don't know, our Volt was involved in an accident a couple of weeks ago. I think I've alluded to it in the show. Someone came off a motorbike coming around a corner. They took they took the corner too fast, basically. They tried to lean the motorbike over. The motorbike went one way. The rider mercifully went the other way and went away from the car. But, I was driving at the time. I stopped, but the bike didn't. So it carried on and hit the car. It's in the shop at the moment being repaired. My wife's driving my Leaf at the moment. She drove it the other day and forgot to press the charge now button on the Leaf. Now, if you'd studied that data, you'd go, well, she charged at work, she charged at home, she drove within the range of the vehicle. But actually, she ended up having to stay at work another 3 hours to make sure that she'd got enough charge to get home. So it could be argued she didn't drive within the range of the vehicle. She just made the range fit her needs. And I think that's what you're getting at, isn't it, Mark? It's that thing. All right, BYD. Yeah, oh, sorry.
Could I maybe just add something to that? Because I think I think, these car people have just... we shouldn't assume they're right by any means. I mean, when Tesla first announced the Model S, they had no intentions whatsoever of supporting three-phase charging in Europe. They just basically, effectively were not aware of it because they'd spoken to some European power companies and basically been told you don't need it. The reality was that drivers knew what they needed and campaigned to get Tesla to change their mind. And today, the Model S is a fantastic success in Europe because it has three-phase charging. And, the reality is that if you give people range, one of the things that they then almost don't need whatsoever is rapid charging. So, and many of us who have experienced, and we were started off this piece talking about rapid charging infrastructure. Well, if we all had longer range, we'd need very, very little rapid charging. So I don't think we should assume that these people actually know what they're doing. They're coming from particularly the old school ICE companies. They're just coming at this thinking of it like a car, whereas it's actually something very, very, very different in the way people are going to use it.
And it's not just the car companies and the charging companies, it's even the people that cover the stories as well. I mean, that's one of the things that we are going to try and do because as we've talked about this before, Transport Evolved is going to become a news site. It's not just going to be a podcast every week. It's going to be a daily news site. We're going to be covering things on a day-to-day basis. We're going to be doing buying guides. We're going to be doing news. We're going to be expanding all that advice and information. And one of my key kind of tenets to that is the people who are working on the Transport Evolved and writing for the Transport Evolved or contributing to the Transport Evolved, because no one's getting paid to begin with at least, is that they must be drivers or at least have had a substantial amount of time behind the wheel of an electric vehicle, because they know better what is needed, or they need to be industry insiders who've been working in the industry for so damn long that they're part of the furniture. And I think this is the problem. We're getting all these people coming along saying they're going to build things and it goes wrong, which brings us nicely to our next story. Now, BYD, Build Your Dreams, it's been a battery company in China for yonks. It's one of the world's largest providers of batteries. Incidentally, there's even a hint that Tesla might be buying cells from BYD because Tesla needs so many of them. But BYD, to its misfortune, is trying to build electric vehicles. And in my humble opinion, as you might have seen this week on the quick drive episode that we released, it's not doing that. It's producing cars which are subpar and are not working. The E6 has had so much trouble, both in China and wherever else it's tried to go. BYD has now said it's going to try and produce an electric sports car. Mark.
Because that's what you want. I mean, once you go for, I know it's what Tesla did, but surely you don't, unless you are incredibly sure of yourself. I mean, a sports car, there's so much expectation around the car and just slipping by a little bit. I mean, your 0 to 60 times slipping by a second is actually a huge thing. Whereas a 0 to 60 times slipping by a second on a city runabout doesn't actually matter that much. There's going to be so much pressure on them to make this car exactly what they say it is.
The E6, 0 to 62 in 3.9 seconds.
Yeah, good luck to them. I hope they do it. I really do hope they do it. I'm not convinced they will. Maybe they'll do it downhill.
Not the 21% incline at Millbrook.
No.
I should say at that point, I've had several people come along and tell me off and said, in that video, I stopped on the Millbrook track. I did. I was naughty. I stopped, and you're not supposed to. I stopped because I had a sense that the car was about to stop anyway, as Mark will testify. and I
went into those hills slightly faster than you did.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I had the momentum to go up and you, because you were, I'm guessing, doing something with the steering, doing your journalistic things, went into that hill slower, and it was painful.
It was. And as someone said in the chat room, isn't that the same company that wouldn't climb a hill last winter? Yes. All right. On to Tesla, who is a company that we are developing more and more confidence with on a daily basis. Tesla this week, Elon Musk has talked in the past about self-driving cars or autopilot cars. He doesn't like saying autonomous. He likes calling them autopiloted cars or cars with autopilots. Has now come out and said, within 3 years, Tesla will produce cars with autopilots that will be able to take control of 90% of the trips that we do. Hasn't detailed what that technology is. A couple of weeks ago, Tesla advertised for a specialist on its website to work in that field, autonomous driving. I think Tesla's going to be working on an angle that will include safety rather than Google's sense, which is make a car that will drive somewhere for me and I never have to drive. I think Tesla's approach is much more achievable.
Yeah, and I think when you look at high-end cars now, we're very, very close to that already. I mean, we've got technology which will park the car for you in spaces that you would never be able to park it. We've got technology that will slow your car down to a stop by following the car in front of you, will speed up and slow down with that car. I think some cars have even got it to the point where they will follow cars in and around corners. So we're pretty much at the stage where you could develop a car, drive onto a motorway and just press a button and it follows the car in front of you. But
that would work. I mean, that's good for headlines though, isn't it? And as someone in the chat room, as Matt in the chat room said, autonomous and autopilot are two different things. We're talking about a system akin to what you see in commercial airliners, which is some commercial airliners should the pilot and co-pilot be incapacitated, if someone can take control of the plane, they can land it. But when you get up in the air in a commercial airliner, once you have got on your flight path and you've programmed it into they have this little box that sits by the co-pilot and the pilot. Once you programmed in where you're going, the plane pretty much flies itself. But the pilot and the co-pilot don't go and kick in the back and just, have a martini. They stay up front, they stay alert, they keep their eyes on the instruments, they keep their eyes on what's going on. And should something happen, someone is always there to take control of the plane, say, I have control, autopilot off, and off they go. And I think this is what Tesla's looking at, which is, I think, the best way of doing it. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Nikki, you're absolutely right. That, and as Mark said, this technology feels as if it would be achievable in a sort of timescales they're talking about. And one of the things that struck me many times is that, using the technology, for instance, when you're cruising on the motorway, using technology to look beyond where you can see, so that, there's been an accident 20 cars ahead of you. And those accidents gets much worse because, of course, you don't see it and your reaction time. But if these cars have some communications mechanism between them, there's a potential to actually, to avert much larger accidents on motorways, for example. And I think those sort of technologies will be with us very quickly.
And there's also fuel saving. I mean, in order to get real fuel saving benefits at high speed, cars still need to be really close to one another. I mean, you see these people going, "Oh, when I'm driving my EV, I draft behind a truck." I'm sorry, there is no way that you can safely draft behind a truck, because you really would have to be up its jacksie in order to get any benefit. But with an autonomous driving system like this, as Volvo's illustrated, if the distance can be separated by a few millimetres or a few inches, then you do get the fuel saving benefits. I mean, Volvo's demonstrated it before in the past. So, I mean, I don't think it's unachievable. Right. Do you know any Teslaonaires, Mark?
I wish I was one, but no.
This is a new word. Explain to us what a Teslaonaire is.
So it's the idea that when Tesla first floated itself on the stock market, its shares were, I think, $18 a piece, which, as shares go, is kind of something you weigh up at the time whether it's worth it. And now when you look at those share price, they're now, I think it's something along the lines of $150 a piece. So they've almost gone up by a factor of 10, which means a lot of people have probably got very happy from Tesla.
The joke is now, if you invested the amount of money that the Model S cost when Tesla floated on the stock market, you'd now have your money back, plus you'd be able to buy a Model S. That's kind of the idea, isn't it? And there are people out there who, got $250,000 sitting in a fund somewhere because they happen to invest, however many $1,000 when it started. Do you know any Teslaonaires, Kevin?
I do, yeah. I mean, I know a number of people within Tesla, and yes, I do know some that have either as employees, or actually I know some people that invested as well, and I'm very happy for them.
Yeah.
I personally made a conscious decision not to invest because I wanted to be able to personally promote Tesla,
right,
without any sort of
and
any risk of there being bias, other than the fact that I and I've been very critical of Tesla in the past as well, but I feel because I don't have a financial stake in them, I'm free to say what I want about them. But I'm very pleased for those people that put money into it, the employees. I mean, just to give you one example, the one of the guys, as I think there was a Tesla driver over from Switzerland last week, and I did some driving with him, and he had, what was his problem? Oh, he had a tire problem that he needed to sort out. This was, I think it was 9:00 on Sunday evening. He put a call into Tesla, and Simon, who runs the Tesla workshop in the UK, took that call, answered it, and actually arranged so that on the Monday morning there would be tires available for this guy.
Wow.
They then actually waited for the guy to turn up. He arrived late. They waited for him and got the tire swapped over. Now, so every single one of those people who has shares as a result of working for Tesla deserves it. You won't find anybody who works harder than those people. Yeah.
And I would also add that I'm very glad that you don't have shares. I know people who do who have them. I don't have any. This is a matter of thing. I will not invest in any company that I cover, and also I will not have adverts for companies that I cover on the network. We are going to have ads on, I think it's a good time to talk about ads. We are going to have ads on the Transport Evolved site. They will be Google AdSense words. if they happen to be for a car, it's because they were fed from Google, not from us directly. So I'm kind of putting that out there so people know where we sit. Okay, let's have another break. And this time we're going to find out about chronoviruses.
It was supposed to be just another cargo run, but for Ken Mallory and the 3-person crew of the Raven, an anomaly in deep space changes everything. An unexpected turbulence shakes the small ship like never before, allowing a deadly virus aboard. One by one, the infected crew is thrown back in time to relive a near-death experience. Only this time, death may be closer than they remember. My short story Chronovirus is available for Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble Nook, Kobo, iBooks, Sony, and for all other devices and e-readers through Smashwords. Learn more about Chronovirus by visiting my website at www.aaroncrocco.com.
And there we have a chronovirus. Very interesting. All right, on and moving forward. GM has been spurred by Tesla to say it's going to produce a 200-mile EV by 2015, 2016, in the $30,000 price range. Okay, Tesla said 35 for its Model E after incentives. GM's going, no, 30 grand, we'll do it. And has also said that it's going to reduce the cost of its Gen 2 Volt by between $7,000 and $10,000. It's going to make there's talk about the engine being a 3-cylinder aluminium or aluminum engine, and also that it's going to be much lighter and much more efficient and go further on a charge. Do we think that GM has got caught up in chasing Tesla just because we can't let some Californian upstart who builds rocket ships teach us how to make cars? Who's actually from South Africa, but it doesn't really matter.
I think they've realised I think they've got scared. I think before this, they've been seeing Tesla as very much their deal with their little niche of the EV drivers with money, and they can deal with that. And now Tesla have shown that they can do that, and they're moving towards GM's market. I think GM are getting scared, and they've just put together a press release to get some attention back on them. I don't think they've got any sort of plan to live up to this. I would be very surprised if the figures in this go pretty far beyond the actual marketing department.
Okay, even if GM produces this vehicle, it's got a long way, and I actually wrote an article about this week on pluggincars.com. It's got a long way to match Tesla. It's not just about range. It's about ownership experience. It's about upgradability. It's about servicing. It's about sales. It's about a whole holistic approach to EVs, which is alien to the mainstream automakers. And that's why their dealers are kicking up such a stink that Tesla is trying to sell directly to consumers. So if GM, or any other automaker for that matter, wants to come along and match Tesla in terms of price and range and speed and performance, it's also got to match the way it sells the cars, the way it services the cars, the way it provides free charging for its owners, and the way that it upgrades cars and does an upgrade path. Kevin, I cannot upgrade my Leaf. No way, no how, unless I go to my Nissan dealer and buy a new Leaf. I and Mark both want 32 amp 7 kilowatt charging in our Leafs. We want to be able to walk up to a Nissan dealer and go, okay, here's the money, take out the old charger, put the new charger in, I'll pick the car up in 3 days. Doesn't happen. The only way we can do it is to go the third party route, which is the DIY route, and do it ourselves, but maybe break our warranty. If we owned a Tesla, as you've illustrated in the past, you had you've got a Tesla 1.5 and you went in and you upgraded the dashboard, didn't you? They just did it for you. So you could put a different head unit in.
Tesla have actually continuously improved the car, through its life. And, which is remarkable given there are only 2,500 of them. I mean, it's an extraordinary commitment on their part. So, we've got improved cooling, improved the PEM has been upgraded. Power management system's been upgraded. All sorts of upgrades, and there's talk, although we don't know, and there's a commitment from Tesla to do something for Roadster owners in the future. We don't know if that's continuous upgrades or whatever, but what Tesla have demonstrated to date is that upgrades are completely possible. That this technology is much more like the computers that we're used to and is upgradable. And, it's a very solid approach to the ownership experience. Yeah. And I think what I'd also pick up from, both what you've said and Mark said especially, this press release is about fear. They wouldn't, GM have been very dismissive, as we all know, in the past about, true commitment to EVs. And Tesla is showing that this is such a huge shift for them right across the board, as you were saying. It's massive for the dealer network and everybody else. So, it's easy to write stuff down. What we need to do is actually see the cars on sale. And when you see the cars on sale, then it's believable. But until that point, it's just press.
Let's move on to California, where good things are happening in the charging world. Good old California. California is currently pushing two bills. One is, I believe, in the Senate, and one is in the House, I believe. AB 1092 and SB 454. Now, the first one, AB 1092, is designed to make it mandatory. I believe it's for new buildings only. For new buildings, whether multi-family dwellings and commercial properties, to have EV charging as part of the build. You have to have it. It's not an if or a maybe. It's no, I'm sorry, building regulations, you have to have EV charging, which is brilliant for anyone who lives in a condo, because condo dwellers or apartment dwellers to this point have not been able to easily charge their cars because they don't have a parking space they don't have a garage, they don't have a parking space next to their to their front door, and if they do have a parking space or a garage, it's a communal garage where they have to walk down to their car. So that's brilliant. The other one, SB 454, is the best one. It's deregulate. Well, no, it's de-smart cardizing in some ways. While it doesn't remove smart cards from charging stations, it says to charging providers, okay, you have to allow roaming between your networks. So somebody with a card from a rival charging company has to be able to use your charging station. Plus, if someone comes up with a credit card, they have to be able to pay for their charging, just like they'd be able to fill up with gas with their credit card. Mark, would you like to do that again?
Yes, I'm just it makes sense. I don't understand membership schemes because it does the opposite of what they want. It limits the number of people who can use their charging stations, which makes no sense to me. It's like going, we've got this service we're providing to all EV drivers. No, in fact, no, what we'll do is we'll give everyone these cards, or we'll give some people these cards. And if someone turns up without a card who could charge, we won't let them. It doesn't make any sense. And well, I'm just glad.
It's like the failure model, isn't it?
What, set up to fail? Set
up to fail. I mean, we were at an event recently, Mark and I. We had a meeting, didn't we? An EV meet. And luckily, you and I were the only two that turned up that well, no, there were 3 or 4 of us, but no one actually needed to charge apart from one person who went and found somewhere else. And they were a Volt driver, or an Ampera driver, so they were okay. But we turned up, brand new charging station installed.
Yeah,
got the RFID card, swiped it.
Didn't work.
Swiped it again. Nothing happened. And we rang up and, it didn't work. I do apologise. There is a spider walking up my green screen. I don't know if you can see this. Oh no, it's where Kevin is. So, this is bizarre.
It's on your face. It's on your face.
There's a spider just there on my green screen. So if you see just this random spider appearing to walk up my green screen, that's where it is and that's where it's going. And now I've pulled my headphones out in the excitement. Sorry.
I think it's the excitement of, 2 pieces of legislation that actually put the EV driver first. And, you know, if you put the EV driver first, then you do get these sort of bills, and everybody moves forward and it works. So, you know, the advice is always the same. Just talk to EV drivers. They know what they need.
Absolutely.
It's easy.
Right. Would you guys buy a pre-owned certified Leaf? Nissan in the US has now started this pre-owned certified Leaf program. It's the same as the one they've had in Japan. Certain warranty period extends on the vehicle in terms of capacity. But what's it going to do to Leaf prices if your car is not certified, Mark? I know you were worried about this in the past.
I suppose it depends what the criteria is for being certified. As long as that criteria is reasonable, I think it's a good system. It depends. Yeah, it fully depends on that criteria. If there's something utterly ridiculous in there to do that's a hangover from the fact that they're used to dealing with internal combustion engines and now it's a EV, then it's going to be a useless system. But yeah, there's always an issue with secondhand prices and cars, and part of me wants the secondhand prices to be really high because I've leased my car and I'm probably going to buy it out at the end. So if it's worth more than what I buy it out for, great. But part of me, and the more sensible part, knows that they need to be cheap because the secondhand market's where EVs are going to get a foothold, I think.
Although there is a fear that because people aren't buying EVs in the UK at the moment really in any great numbers, and in the US, because people are buying them and the second-hand market is not very buoyant because the new cars are dropping in price so damn quickly, residuals for the cars are also going down. And that's meaning that the lease payments will go up because the car companies, the finance companies won't want to write off a residual value. They won't want a high residual value because they want to ensure that they get their money's worth from the customer. So that might go wrong. Okay, Nissan also finally gets it in its latest ad, which I won't play because they might get upset with me because YouTube. If you play an ad, sometimes they get upset. And also it's not a very easy to play ad because of the network it's on. Nissan is saying in its latest ad, it isn't why drive electric, it's why have a petrol car? Why drive gas? Nissan has finally got to that point in its ad. It's going, look, it does all these cool things. Why would you want to put petrol in? Why would you want gasoline? What's the point? It's taken Nissan 3 years to get to that point, though. So how long is it going to take all these other car companies to get to that point? I'm thinking BMW. I'm thinking Ford. I'm thinking Honda. I'm thinking Toyota. How long is it going to get these other guys to play catch up? Are we now in a situation where we can start drawing a list of which car companies have actually got the message and which ones haven't, Kevin? Or do we think it's just a few, or maybe none? Is Tesla the only one that gets it?
I think Tesla are the only people who get it seriously, and because they live or die by this. I mean, if they don't make EVs a success, then they're dead. And so, that brings them a lot of focus. I think the other companies, it's less clear. It's a transition and a difficult one for them. But it's fantastic to see ads for this. And I think, we really need to focus on this. I mean, I had the unfortunate experience on my recent trip to Italy of having to drive an ICE, which was the first time I'd spent any time in an ICE for 3 years. The odds, I don't know, half a day on a long trip with Susie or something, but most of the time I just don't drive an ICE. And it was truly horrible. I mean, this whole thing of you have to press all these pedals and wiggle this thing while you're trying to let go of the steering wheel, and you get it wrong, and then you have to do it all again, and it's horrible. It's really horrible. So I think the sooner we can get beyond this whole and it's marketing, of course, because cars are sold as being sexy and lovely, but EVs are sexy and lovely. Really sexy and lovely.
And
ICE
I must say,
just horrible.
One of my kids commented this week, because I've got the courtesy car. We finally got a courtesy car, and it's a little Peugeot 107, and it's gasoline. because I'm not a horrible person and my wife does most of the driving, I've let her take my EV. And I've been driving this horrible 107 round all week. And my kids the other day went, Mum, are you in a bad mood because you're driving a petrol car? It's like, yes, totally. All right, moving on to the and finally. Congratulations to the Kilojoule from Killer Cycle. Made a new racing record at the Bonneville Salt Flats. 213.250 miles per hour was the top speed recorded. But the certified speed, because you have to do 2 runs, you have to go backwards and forwards, you have to do 2 runs within a certain period of time, was 210.844 miles per hour for a fully enclosed electric motorcycle. Here it is, here with the team behind it. So congratulations to them. Absolutely brilliant it was. And finally, it's International Plug-in Day next week. On Sunday and Saturday next week. Saturday, Sunday, 27th, 28th. Is that right, Mark? It's International
That sounds right.
Plug-in Day. All around the world, mainly in America, but all around the world, there will be events to celebrate EVs. I am considering us having a little breakfast somewhere in Bristol for EV owners on the Sunday morning. We are in the evening going to have our very first Transport Evolved show, Mark.
We are.
But in the interim, you got tons of stuff to do on the Saturday, tons of stuff to do on the Sunday, especially if you live somewhere like California, in the Bay Area, or down near LA, or even further south. In the central states, there are less events, but there should still be an event within a sensible distance, unless you live somewhere like Montana, because I don't think they've got any events taking place. But generally, there are events. I think there's over 70 events now on the Plug in America website. So do go along, do take part, do evangelize. If you don't own an EV, it's a great way to go along and take part and learn about EVs for the first time. Talk to owners, get a seat in a car, maybe even get a ride or a drive. If you are an owner, please volunteer at your local event, because the more people there, the more people will see that EVs are valid, are viable, are here, etc., etc., etc. So please take part. And next week, Mark, we will be recording on a Sunday, won't we?
We will. Sunday evening, which will be the time when we do it from now on. This show will go out live on a Sunday evening and probably go up onto YouTube within the sort of following couple of days.
Yes, and we're hoping to get it up on a Monday. Now, on a Thursday, we won't have a show. We'll just put up one of our pre-recorded videos. On a Friday, Mark and I are going to record the Transport Evolved news show. For the first couple of weeks, it might be a bit ropey.
But while we get the processes sorted.
While we get the processes sorted. If you are a graphic artist and you would like to help us give some of your time, we're looking for some people to do some icons. We can't pay you at the moment, but we can obviously credit you on our site. If you would like to help us with some graphics, please get in touch. You can email me, nikki@transportevolved.com, or mark@transportevolved.com. Where were we? So Sunday next week, we will be recording an hour earlier than we record this. So instead of it being 8 p.m. British Summer Time, it's going to be 7 p.m. British Summer Time, which will be, Mark, 2 p.m. on the East Coast.
That sounds
and 11 a.m.
right.
on the West Coast.
Yes.
And we might even have a Skype in number. We're going to try and make that happen, so you could actually call in at your event and tell us about your event, your plug-in day event. And I hope that you tell everybody about the new website, which will go live in the middle of next week. And I hope you tell everybody about the new Transport Evolved. You will, won't you, Kevin?
Oh, absolutely. And I must say, I've really enjoyed the short videos and then the longer ones. I think that works really well. And I know you're trying to, guests permitting, keep these a bit punchier as well. And I think that's fantastic. So I know everybody that I've spoken to about it is really excited about what you're doing. So I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And thank you for being on the show. Come back again soon. That really is it for today.
Now we're allowed.
Yes, now we're allowed. Now you're allowed, of course. That is really it for the show. Thanks for joining us. And as I say, keep your fingers crossed for the new regime next week. Or regime sounds wrong, but you know what I mean.
New world order.
The new world order of plug-in cars. That really is it, folks. And until next time, don't forget to plug in. See ya. Take care. Bye.